It's a brand new episode of Flyers Daily here on the Flyers Broadcast Network. Flyers Daily, of course, is brought to you by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. I'm Brian Smith in for Jason Myrtetus today as we take a look back at the game against Winnipeg, a 4-1 loss to the Winnipeg Jets at Wells Fargo Center, and a game that probably wasn't that close. And it's, again, a period here where there's ebbs and flows in a hockey season, and right now the Flyers are in a bit of an ebb after the loss to Calgary, followed by this one against Winnipeg, and really not a lot to break down with this one. It's just a point in the season where the things aren't going well. Some of the connections that John Tortorella talked about earlier this week that were there during the first few games out of the Four Nations break, especially the game in Winnipeg last Saturday, the first game against the Jets, the Flyers won in the shootout. Well, that connected play is not there right now, and it's it's easy to look at this team and see they're a little bit adrift right now. But again, it is something that happens in a hockey season, and they're just going to need to play their way out of it. They've got plenty of opportunities to do so, that's for sure, here in the month of March. They've got a back-to-back coming up here tomorrow and Sunday, and then 3 more games in this homestand. So you can rest assured that they are probably going to be arriving against Seattle on Saturday in ill humor. These 2 weekend games are going to have that little wrench thrown in there that they're matinee games. In fact, the Seattle game is even earlier than normal. It's a 12:30 start. But a lot of guys will tell you that they like to just wake up and get to the rink, and so they tend to like some of these early games. So, again, it's not the greatest situation overall, including the fact that the clocks change Saturday night into Sunday, so that even that 1 o'clock game is going to feel like an earlier game than normal. But it's one of those situations where they just got to play their way out of this. And again, there's not a whole lot to break down. Even John Tortorella's post-game presser after this one was only 41 seconds long. But they're going to address this, and they are going to look to play their way out of it again, starting against Seattle on Saturday. We do have a special guest here on this edition of Flyers Daily that we want to bring to you with a lot of great stories. His name is Andy Abramson, and he was an employee of the Philadelphia Wings back in the 1970s. The Flyers, of course, were the main component of Spectacor, but the original incarnation of the Philadelphia Wings lacrosse team, not the one from the 80s that was so dominant, but there was one even earlier that started in 1974. They were dominant as well, and they were part of the Flyers family back then. Andy Abramson's, again, one of the employees from that group, and he's got some great stories to tell us that all relate back to the Flyers, really. But the reason he is here is because at the Philadelphia Wings game tomorrow night, which is a 7 o'clock start at Wells Fargo Center, part of basically a triple-header weekend, the 1974 and 1975 teams are coming back for a reunion in Philadelphia for the first time ever, 50 years after they were winning championships in indoor lacrosse here in Philadelphia. They are all back together, and you can meet them. There's going to be a meet and greet going on at 5:30 here at Wells Fargo Center in the East Food Hall, and a ticket to the Wings game will get you into that meet and greet, and you can hear a lot of great stories about that era, which all connect very much to the Flyers, actually, because of just kind of the way things played out. One of the stories Andy's going to tell us here involves May 19th, 1974, the day the Flyers won their first Stanley Cup here in South Philadelphia, over across the street at the Spectrum. That was a 1 o'clock game. The Wings played that night in the same building at 7 o'clock. And also throwing a wrench into that one was Doug Favell, who was the Flyers' original goaltender, traded to Toronto in the 1973 deal that brought Bernie Parent back to Philadelphia. He was a forward playing for the Wings at that time. So he saw the Stanley Cup win and then went out and played a lacrosse game that night. So Andy is also part of the origins of a lot of the youth hockey things that go on here around the Philadelphia area, a lot of which started with the Flyers back in that era in the 70s and 80s, launching things like Mites on Ice and the Flyers Cup, which, of course, is getting underway here very soon for this season. They all have their origins back in, Flyers grassroots efforts in the 1980s. So Andy was involved in all of that. He's back here with this Wings group for the weekend, and he sat down with us to tell quite a few stories here. So here's our chat with Andy Abramson from the Philadelphia Wings in the 70s. Special guest here on Flyers Daily as we get ready for a special weekend here at Wells Fargo Center. Of course, the Flyers have two games, two matinee contests, Saturday at 12:30 against Seattle, Sunday at 1 o'clock against the New Jersey Devils. In between, the Philadelphia Wings are going to be taking on the Albany Firewolves, and they're trying to get things pointed in the right direction. The Wings have three new players after a couple of big trades this week, including Mitch DeSnoo, one of the most potent defensive and transition players in the league, a guy you hate to play against. He's now on the Wings, so they're hoping that's going to turn things around. But it's a big weekend for celebrating the 50th anniversary of the 1974-1975 Philadelphia Wings, which are two incarnations ago. And with us to discuss this situation is Andy Abramson, who was, I'll let you describe exactly what you were doing for the team back then, public relations, obviously, but I bet you were probably doing a lot more than just that.
Well, back in 74, 75, I was 14 years old, and Ed Tepper, who was the owner of the Wings, Tepper had been offered the team by Mr. Snyder, and I met him at a Flyers fan club meeting where I was selling an ad for my junior high school yearbook. Mm-hmm. And Ed Tepper said, come to the office, I'll give you a check and an ad. I came to the office. He goes, the ad's not ready. Here's the check, but can you take these posters and put them in some windows in your neighborhood stores? And I said, yeah, sure. And what I did was what any aspiring sports marketing executive would do, Brian. Mm-hmm. I delegated to my mother.
Nice.
And Mom put them in all the store windows because she knew all the merchants, obviously, because she shopped there. I was in school. How would I know they were? Right. And I went back to get the ad, and Ed said, I told him I needed more posters, and he said, well, can you come in and work next week during the Jewish holidays to help stuff tickets? I said, sure. And he goes, we'll pay you. I go, oh, great. And one thing led to another, and a few weeks later, Marcia Rossi was driving me home, and then Cy Roseman was hired. Cy was the first PR director of the Spectrum, and Frank Rizzo's police commissioner's public information officer and a city rep before all that. And before even that, a high school English teacher. He said, forget about stuffing tickets. I've got a better job for you because you're going to work for me. My last assistant was Stevie Greenberg. He's now director of production of the Spectrum. Okay, sounded pretty cool. So I went from stuffing tickets to, guess what, stuffing press releases. Yep. But it was more than that. We went around every couple of days to deliver news releases to the media outlets, and no one was going to stop a 14-year-old kid from walking in the back door of the Enquirer. Mm-hmm. Daily News were in the same building, the Bulletin, UPI, Associated Press was in the Bulletin building, the then 3 TV stations. I would just walk in, and everybody thought, well, this must be somebody's kid. They all had security guards who were doing nothing but reading the newspaper. Mm-hmm. And that was how I got to know people like Don Tollefson, and then Joe Pellegrino, Al Meltzer, Huey Gannon, Bob Bradley, and others like them, and eventually Howard Eskin and the rest of the crew, and of course the Enquirer reporters. Back then, Chuck Newman, Frank Dolson. I also got to know the guys on the copy desk like George Jernoden and Bob Ewing, and they became the go-to people that I would call in the scores after the game.
Yeah, yep. We did a lot of the same thing with the Philadelphia Phantoms when they were here, because you're the fifth horse in a 4-horse town back then before even the Union were here. So it's just grassroots marketing. The one day that I think a lot of folks don't necessarily realize what happened around here was May 19th, 1974, and of course, Flyers fans know that's the day the Flyers won their first Stanley Cup. It seems unfathomable in this day and age, but that day, that was like a 1 o'clock game or something like that in the afternoon. It was a double day. The Wings played at night at the Spectrum after the Flyers won the Stanley Cup there, something that certainly would never happen today. But what do you remember about that day here in South Philadelphia?
Well, I was there. And I was there for the Flyers game. So we had been promoting lacrosse during the Stanley Cup playoffs. We never lost a home game that year, by the way. Flyers never lost a home game. And Ed Tepper had his business card with a note on the back from Mr. Snyder that said, admit to all games, EMS. And I would use that, and I would walk past Joe Ford and Les Graves were working, and there's one other guy, I forget his name, white-haired guy. And they would, okay, he's supposed to be in. And we would grab this, Joey Doney and I would grab this TV set stand, and we had about a 27-inch TV set. Now, back then, that was a big thing.
Yeah.
27 inches was pushing the limits.
That was pretty big back then.
And we had a Sony U-matic video cassette player, not VHS, but U-matic, so it was 3/4 inch. And we would play this 15-minute video about box lacrosse over and over and over until we could recite the whole thing until the cows came out. And we would play that on the concourse behind section AZ at the Spectrum, and people would come over and say, "What's lacrosse?" And we would hand them a brochure, and some people would sign up for season tickets right then and there. And that was how we promoted it. So May 19th came, and we had to promote it just like any other game, but it wasn't just like any other game. Flyers were up, I guess 3-1 or 3-2. We were playing against Boston. Game started, nationally televised game on NBC. Game started around 1 o'clock. Kate Smith comes out, the good luck charm of the Flyers. Sore subject that she's no longer allowed to be. Kate came out live and in person, the grand piano, and they played God Bless America. The crowd was electrified.
Yeah.
I don't ever remember a game where the crowd, you could feel the electricity in the air. And we're standing and we're moving from down here to up there, down here from up there, from either Section A or up to Section 1, depending when we get chased by security. And you watch the game, and Kate finishes the national anthem, and I guess it was Johnny Busick or Kenny Hodge skates over with a bouquet of roses. Didn't break the jinx. Rick McLeish tips in a Moose DuPont slap shot. Bernie Perrant plays Katie bar the door. Flyers win the Stanley Cup. And the worst moment in Philadelphia history, what would have been the best moment, gets turned into the worst because the fans refused to respect the players and never gave them the chance to skate around the ice with the cup.
Yeah, it was a different atmosphere back then.
That was something that, I could not believe it. Anyway, game's over, and now it's changeover time. Of course, you got to clean the building, which was a total mess. They didn't really clean it completely. We did get the homosote down. We got the floor down. And back then, it was wood, not turf. And it's about 6 o'clock. Bruins game ended around, Stanley Cup game ended around 5:03. It's about 6 or 6:30, and some of our players had gotten in and watched the game from the tunnel.
Okay.
And I'm downstairs, and John Grant, Sr., Jimmy Wasson, Larry Lloyd, and Terry Lloyd had been watching the game. And they're now standing outside what was the visiting NHL locker room. And by that time, I'd already been indoctrinated into the team, and I had a nickname, and it was Opie. And Opie Taylor, because I carried my school books in a leather book strap that my dad, who ran post offices, had given me because I didn't want to carry a bag. And John Grant says, "Look, there's Opie Taylor," and Carm started calling me Opie. So anyway, John goes, "Hey, Ope, we need to get dressed. We got to get in the locker room." And I said, "Well, the Bruins are in there." And John says, "Well, kick them the bleep out." And I go, "You want me to?" "Yeah, we got to get dressed." So I walked down and I grabbed two security guards, John Turner and Elijah Hughes. John was a small one. John was about 6'5", 265, looked like he could have played linebacker or defensive line for the Eagles back then. His daytime job was a non-teaching assistant at Simon Gratz High School. Back then, the roughest, toughest, gang-infested high school in the city. And the other guy was Elijah Hughes. Elijah Hughes was 6'9", and he wore the Stevie Wonder black sunglasses, and he was about 305. So I said, "Guys, can you help me get the Bruins out of the locker room? Because we got to get ready. The guys have a game in a little while." Now, we didn't realize the game wasn't going to start at 7. We knew it was going to start a little later, but it didn't start till about 8 or 8:30. So I go in, and a few players are left. There's Phil Esposito, Gilles Gilbert, and I think it's either Busick, Hodge, or Cashman. And they're still in their hockey pants. They got their shirts off. They're in their long johns, and they're smoking cigars. And I walk up and say, "Hey guys, sorry you lost, but we need a locker room. We've got another event tonight." And Espo looked up at me like I must have been crazy. Like, "Are you kidding me, kid?" When John Turner says, "Can we help you with your bags, boys?" and kicked them out. And they got up and they left. And that was our opening year. And we played the Montreal Québécois. I think we beat them 17-14. The score I don't remember, but I know we won. We had played a game a few days earlier in Maryland against the Maryland Arrows, and Carm Collins got into a fight against Paul Suggett, breaking Suggett's nose.
Wow.
I'll never forget it. Our game press conference on the Friday, Dave Natale, the co-owner with Ed Tepper, goes, "And let me introduce Captain Carm Collins. My name is Paul Saget." And he's holding his nose because Saget's nose was broken. So it was a great start, and if anything, we were able to capture the emotion and the thrill of the Broad Street Bullies.
When you look at that game, too, another little bit of a wrinkle there involved Doug Favell. And I know that, that had to have been an interesting day for him because he was an original Flyer. He ends up getting traded to Toronto for Bernie Perrant, but he is also the goaltender for the Philadelphia Wings, which I'm not sure a lot of people. Well, he wasn't that at that point. He was not.
He was never a goalie.
It just played for them.
Doug was never a goaltender.
Okay, I did not realize that. Okay, but he's on the team, right?
No, but Doug was a goaltender in hockey.
Yeah.
In lacrosse, he had always been a forward.
Yeah, we actually have that now with Blaze Reardon. He was a goaltender outside and forward inside, so I didn't realize that part of it.
He had never played goal in lacrosse, though.
Okay, but I'm sure an interesting day for him because he sees that happen, and then he's got to go out there and play after.
So Doug's wearing number 33. Gets introduced, and the crowd goes nuts.
Yeah.
Mike Collins is number 35. No one even hears him announce Mike Collins. After the game, Mike Collins says to Doug, "Next time you wear 36." Favell was great. In the locker room, he didn't come in with this, "I'm a hockey goaltender superstar." He came in to play like one of the guys. He was very much a team player. He was very much a part of the team. He blended in. He had a lot of very good stick skills. Of course, he was a little rusty. He hadn't played like the other guys have been playing consistently in senior lacrosse every summer. But Doug was a good guy, and he also has a great sense of humor. He kept everybody loose, and he was fun to be around. And he actually mentioned to Larry Lloyd, he can't make it for the reunion this weekend, but he said that one year I played with the Wings was a lot of fun for me, and I really enjoyed the camaraderie, and I wish I could have came back and played in 75, but the Maple Leafs wouldn't let him.
Oh, okay, yeah, I can certainly see that. It's a violent sport now. I'm sure back then it was probably still a little bit of a risk for a professional athlete to try to play both.
That would have been the easy answer. Yeah. The real answer was Harold Ballard didn't like anybody associated with Ed Snyder.
There you go. Yeah, that sounds about right. So tell us a little bit about the effort to bring these guys back for this weekend. I'm sure that this is a big thrill for all these guys.
Well, the first reason why we're doing this is because Ed Tepper, who not only started the Wings but also started major indoor soccer here in Philadelphia and the league he did the Philadelphia Kicks. He's getting older, and Ed hired me, and Ed started the team, and we all have been trying to do a reunion for many years. We actually had one planned for 2021.
Okay.
But COVID hit, and we had to cancel it.
Yeah.
And then we kind of the guys were like, well, I don't know if these guys ever come down. And I want to credit Barry Pasternak and a guy named Malin Dow, who were talking, and Malin reached out to Loiter. Loiter reached out to me. I got together with Barry, and I said, here's what we want to do. And she said, why do you want to do it? And I said, for Ed Tepper and Bobby Allen. Bobby Allen is one of the greatest lacrosse minds, coaches, players of all time, was the Wings' first coach in '74. Taught Fred Shiro how to do a little bit of power play stuff, believe it or not. John Grant and I were talking. He said, well, there was this time in the locker room where Mr. Allen was showing Fred Shiro how lacrosse players, because Fred had watched a game or two. Mm-hmm. And that changed how the Flyers approached the power play in '74, '75.
I want to, before we wrap up with some stuff about the Wings game itself, I want to talk a little bit about your efforts after that with a lot of the youth hockey. We were talking about it offline earlier, but I see in the info you sent specifically the Pepsi Shootout, and I really wish Jason was here tonight, because when Jason was 10 years old, he was in the Pepsi Shootout, and he's brought out that clip every time he has an opportunity to do it. So
I'm probably on it with either Coach or Chief.
I know it's Chief and
it's Gene and Bobby.
Yeah, I think it's Gene and Bobby.
And that was me in the middle, and then we replaced Gene and Bobby with Doc Emmerich, and And Stevie Coates, and it was Doc Emmerich who taught me how to put makeup on.
Oh, okay.
And more importantly, how to take it off.
But everything we've got going on this day and age, the DBHL, the Flyers Cup, which gets started here very soon, kind of all has its roots in stuff that you did under Ed Snyder.
So Ed Snyder in 1976 and his business partner Aaron Siegel, they owned the Radnor Rink together along with Lou Scheinfeld. Mm-hmm. And Aaron was kind of like Ed's emissary into the amateur hockey community. And Ed wanted to do something to create a forward-looking fan development organization. Now, back then we didn't call it fan development, but his vision was quite simple. Get kids playing hockey, they become Flyer fans, their parents take them to games. As they grow up, they become Flyer fans themselves, buy tickets, and they bring their kids start playing, and you have this self-perpetuating fan development organization, all based upon the sport everybody loves. So, Ed Snyder was one of the most brilliant owners in sports. Mr. Snyder was forward-thinking in so many ways. So Aaron gets a hold of Cy Roseman on Lou Scheinfeld's recommendation, and the call was something like this: Ed wants to start an organization to promote youth hockey. You've been recommended to run it. Oh, and bring that kid with you too. Because I was buying the equipment off of Aaron for the wings. And I'd also got known around the spectrum. So we go to this meeting and it gets started. And I didn't know then, but I found out 2 years later when I got promoted to executive director, that the plan was that I would take this thing over after I graduated college. Everybody thought I was like a junior in college. I was a junior in high school.
Wow, okay.
And so we started with Hockey Central, is called. Its offices were in the old Radnor Rink parking lot across the way. And along the way, we created coaching clinics. The Pepsi Shootout was our second big activity we did in '79. We started high school hockey at the Spectrum and junior hockey at the Spectrum on weekends. And then in the fall of '79, I got this one-page note on note paper from Aaron, because back then there was no internet. Larry Jones was the runner between the Spectrum and Spectacor building, Snyder's house, our office, and Larry comes in with the manila envelope, and I open it up, and one-line note from Aaron: call Ed Golden, he has an idea about a high school championship. Because up until then, there was no real regional championship.
Yeah.
So I called Eddie Golden up, and he goes, there isn't this, what do you think? I go, yeah, it'd be a great idea. It'd be great if we can call it the Flyers Cup. And Ed Golden goes, I agree. And I said, I'll go talk to Clarkie, because I'd known Clarkie for half a dozen years already. And I said, we'll make Clarkie the MVP. So that happens. I convinced Bob Butera it's a good idea. Bob Butera then was the president of the Flyers. And in March of 1980, we held a Flyers Cup game at the first of 4 nights at the Penn Rink, with people lining up in every direction. I'll never forget Cheryl Levy, who worked for the Flyers in the PR department. Paul Saylor, who was the rink manager of Grundy, and I are on the sidewalk selling tickets because the ticket lines were in so many directions, and we wanted the game to go. So that kicked off the Flyers Cup. Scott Chamness led Archbishop Carroll to victory, and Scott became one of the first 4 Ed Snyder Award winners 3 years ago. Okay. And then a year later, Mike Richter, and even though they were clearly told I was never to win it by me when I helped the Snyders put it together, Jim Doyle and a bunch of other people went behind my back and put me up for the award.
Yeah, that's how we got Paul Holmgren in the Flyers Hall of Fame, because he pretty much did the same thing.
Yes, I said absolutely not, and it still happened.
But eventually, we're just like, Paul, come on, we got to do
Paul's
this.
Great.
All right.
I have some great Paul Holmgren stories too. But no, so all that stuff: Mites on Ice, Flyers Cup, Pennsylvania Cup, Keystone State Games. I have the scars to prove how we got them done.
That's fantastic. Well, the game again starts at 7 on Saturday night. Wings and the Albany Firewolves. All the meet and greet opportunities and stuff are before the game.
We're going to meet and greet people starting around 5:30. Okay. We're going to obviously sign autographs, as Alan Thicke says. You're not used to saying that you rest in peace. You're not expected to eat when you sign autographs. So come early and come out. But more importantly, this is about 50 years of magic. There were 2 years, Brian, in 74 and 75, and getting to see it through the eyes of a 14 and 15-year-old were quite unique in that the brotherhood and the camaraderie of that group exists to this day. And this is the first time in 50 years they have really gotten together.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we're glad to be a part of it here. Again, wingslax.com is where you get your tickets. The ticket gets you access to the meet and greet. It's in East Food Hall, which is on the 11th Street side, behind Section 115 if you're coming at it from inside the building. And then, if you can't make it in person, we'll have a telecast for you tomorrow or Saturday on Philly 57. Myself, Scott Gabrielson, Mary McGinnis will have the action for you, and we're going to have some guests on the broadcast with us. So really looking forward to that and to this whole experience. But Andy, thanks for all the stories, thanks for the time, and thanks for all the effort you put into this.
I want to thank Barry and Lauren and you, Brian, and the whole Philadelphia Wings /Flyers /Comcast organization for having the foresight to make something happen that has never happened before. So thank you.
So our thanks to Andy Abramson for sitting down and talking with us here and getting us through a rough night for the Philadelphia Flyers as they fall again to the Winnipeg Jets 4-1. Of course, the trade deadline is today. It's at 3:00, and we are going to be all over it. We're going to have a special live edition of Flyers Daily for you around 3:00 today. So make sure you're tuned into the Flyers social channels, and we'll have all the updates on what's gone on with the Flyers at the deadline. We're going to be on from 3 to 4-ish or so. We'll see how the time goes. We do plan on carrying Danny Briere's press conference live somewhere in that hour. So stick it with us here for trade deadline news and Flyers Daily as we get through this Friday afternoon. Trade deadline is at 3:00 today, and then we're moving on from there. So a big Friday, big weekend coming up here at Wells Fargo Center. We'd love to have you a part of it. Tickets for the Flyers, of course, available at PhiladelphiaFlyers.com and the Wings game at WingsLAX.com. That's this edition of Flyers Daily. For Jason Myrtetus, I'm Brian Smith. Have a great night. We'll talk to you on Monday with Bill Meltzer.